Okay. And okay, now I'm gonna close down some of this stuff. Whoop, you don't need to see that. Okay, so can you see my Lightroom now?
Yep.
Yes. All right. Okay, good. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go over a few edits, see how far we get. The first one's going to be really pretty basic. And then we're just going to progressively get a little bit more involved. And nothing is terribly hard, just maybe more steps or more things that you haven't done. I was hoping to introduce some new things to you maybe. So that's kind of where we're going. And I'm looking forward to showing you this. Hopefully it'll be beneficial to you. And then I'm looking forward to seeing Dale's. I love to watch somebody else edit because it gives me ideas that I can pick and choose from. And that's whether it's Dale in the next one or somebody online. But anyway, so I like to watch people edit and figure out what I can use to get my images to look like that I want them to. So anyway, we're going to start up here. And I had taken this photo and it looks pretty dark. That's the one problem, but I had taken more than one image, which we should always do is messing with the composition. And I also took this one. So when I was going through my images, I decided that the composition on this one was my preference. And so I decided to edit this one. And this is where we're going with this one. So this is the final product. So we're going to go back to the original. And I'm going to go ahead and this one is going to stay all in Lightroom. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the original here. And so generally what I like to do, and I'm going to kind of go through my workflow. I tend to, if this is my raw image, I will make a copy before I go on because chances are great somewhere down the line, I may go back through my files and look at this and think, oh, I edited it. What did it look like originally? Because maybe I don't like my edit anymore and I want to redo it. So now I've gotten so that if I remember to do it, I will make a virtual copy and I will keep my straight out of the camera accessible so that I can see it as I go through my Lightroom catalog. And so that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to go ahead and make a virtual copy. And by the way, this circle is just so that you can help follow my cursor. I hope it doesn't bother you too much. It takes some getting used to for me, but I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to go down to make virtual copy. And so it looks just the same because it's the same picture. So anyway, now that I've decided what I'm going to do, the first thing on this picture and the first thing for a lot of my images is I'm going to just try auto. And I click auto to see what it does. And in this case, I don't particularly like what it did. It really lightened up everything, which some of the things needed to be lightened. But in my mind, I would like to selectively decide what gets lightened and what gets darkened. So I'm not going to necessarily stick with the auto setting in this case. And I actually saw this in black and white. And you can see why it's pretty much just kind of greens and white. So I thought I'm going to turn this to black and white. So before I progress any farther, I'm going to go black and white. And you can see that the black and white image, while black and white and fine, isn't really eye-catching. It's like no big deal. I don't know that I would give it a second look. So I want to see if I can give it some added dimension and some spark that makes me want to really look at it. So what I'm going to do is I got to mess with this exposure because it bumped up my exposure over 2 stops. So I'm going to pull this back. I can always come back in here and change it if I choose to, but I'm going to pull it back this far, which gets my background darker. And that's what I want to keep, that background darker. And then I can go ahead and selectively choose my subject matter and lighten it up as I choose to. I'd also like to see more contrast, and contrast makes your lights lighter and your darks darker. So let's go ahead. I'm going to pull that up. And I think somewhere in this area is good. And I want to look at my highlights because it really dropped the highlights down, but I think that's okay for right now. I think I'll leave the shadows alone. The whites, I like the whites to be bright as I can get them because we've got some room to play with. If you look right over here in the histogram, you'll see that the white area in the histogram isn't all the way to the right side. So we have quite a ways that I can push this to the right before I start blowing out my highlights. So I'm going to increase those values at least somewhat. So I'm going to move my white slider and get those white flowers just a little bit brighter. You can see I still have a bit of room over there before I blow out the highlights, but I'm going to stop right here for now because I still want to do some work with it later in this edit. And so it gives me a little bit of room to play with it before I start blowing things out. And my blacks look fine. Texture and clarity dehaze, I'm leaving those all alone for right now. Now, for the most part, I'm not going to do anything else below down in here, with the one exception. When we're done, I'd like to go back and work with the detail section, which is sharpening and noise reduction if necessary, but I'm not going to do that yet. We'll come back to that. So instead, I'm going to go up to the masking panel and I'm going to open that. And I want to make my subject, which is the only one that's really in focus, I want to really work on it and see if I can even make it more a central focus. So what I want to do is I want to select it. I'm going to use an object selection. So I'm going to click on that. And then you have two things. You can either draw out a rectangle over the flower that you want in this case, or you can use a brush. I'm going to use the brush and just kind of zigzag back and forth to get most of it. Now it might not get everything, but if it can get most of it, it might be good enough for me. So didn't have to do a great job, and look, it got almost everything exactly right. It missed a couple of the petals and it missed this one. So I can add those to it by clicking the add button, and I can do it with the objects or the brush. I'm going to go ahead and just use the brush and see if that works. I'm also going to make sure my auto mask is on, and I'm going to try painting in here and see if I can just grab that one. It's not as good as the object, but we'll go with this one for now. So that's pretty good selection. And so now I want to see if I can bump up the exposure just a little bit. And by the way, I was using a flow of 100 and a density of 100 on that brush. I'm going to bump up my exposure just a little bit farther, not too far. Not even a quarter of a stop. So somewhere right in there. It's just a little bit brighter. I'm also going to bump up the contrast a bit more. And let's go up with the whites because I had room to play there. So I want to bring just this one. See, if I would have done the whites larger on the basics panel, it would have also lightened up these two out of focus flowers. And I didn't want that to happen. So this way it's just affecting this particular flower. Okay, so now I'm thinking, I don't know that I want this to be applied to the center of the flower, mostly because I want to apply what I want to the center, because I want that big contrast between the tips of those spiky things and then the shadowy areas. So I think what I would like to do is remove this. So I'm going to come over here to the panel, and I'm still in mask 1, which we could rename if we chose to. I'll just put main flower, which you can kind of see it in the little thumbnail. So I could describe what I've done to it, but we'll just leave it at that for now. And click back on it to get my options here. I'm going to hit subtract. Again, I'm going to use objects. I could use brush. That would work for this situation. I could use radial gradient. That would work. Subject might even work, but it may then select the whole flower. So we'll just go ahead, and I'm going to use object. And I'm going to paint around here. And the reason I chose that instead of brush, because I think it's going to get a really good outline. So if I hover over the square for object, you can see it got almost the entire thing. Why it didn't get that little edge off to the side, I don't know. I could add that in or subtract it away is what I would be doing with a brush. So I could try that. See if that helped at all. So that did get that. So now you can see what's actually affected by whatever I've did my sliders to is the stuff that's in pink. The stuff that's not in pink is now been removed from the selection. I know there's still a few little pieces that could have been added in, but that's fine. And so I'm going to come back and work on that center in just a minute. The other thing before I leave here, I want to check for blown highlights. So to do that, if you're not familiar, you can come up to the arrow on the right at the top of our histogram. And if I click on it, you'll see the red show up down here. Those are actually blown highlights. So at this point, I could paint those out of my selections so they didn't blow out, or I can add another mask to it and kind of bring those down. In this particular case, it's really not bad. I could probably leave it alone. What it means if you blow your highlights, if you're not familiar with it, if you would choose to print it, would be probably the biggest ordeal in something this small, and it really wouldn't be bad anyway, is when you blow your highlights, that means there's no information there. So if you printed it, you'd be looking at the white of the paper as opposed to whatever ink would be laid on it, because there would be no ink where you blow out your whites. So in this case, just so you know how to deal with that, let's paint that away. So I'm going to go up and create a new mask, and I'm going to use a brush tool this time. And it's got auto mask is on. I'm going to make my brush just big enough to cover it, which it is. Don't forget, it's not the green line, it's the flickering circle. I don't know why that's been flickering, but it has been. And I just made a little paint brush mark there, and I'm going to pull down my whites just until the red goes away where I painted. So I just brought my whites down by a -4. If I click on these other two areas, they go away too. There, I've taken care of my blown highlights. All right. So the next thing I'd like to do now is work on the center of that flower. So I'm going to create a new mask. I'm going to do an object selection. I'm going to paint on this again, and hopefully it'll get all of it. There, we got all of it this time. So I did a better job of painting and giving it an idea, I guess. All right, so I want to bring up my exposure on this. So I'm going to, because I want the tips of those pointy things to be kind of bright. So that should do it there. And I want to bring my shadows down a little bit. So I want to darken those shadows in between there. But I do want it to be bright on those tips. So I'm going to bring my whites up because I like that look. Okay, so that's pretty good. I can try to do a couple things. I could try to bring up the contrast, which would make the tips lighter and the darks darker, or to show you a different way to do it, I can remove the darkest area of the center from my mask so that this lightening effect is only happening to the bright spots on the center of the flower. So that's what we're going to do. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a luminance range. So if I go back to my mask 2, which I didn't rename, we'll just do that while we're here. So this is the center. And I'm going to click on these 3 little dots. And one of my options is intersect mask width. And I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to slide to the left, and I'm going to go down to luminance range, because my center is definitely showing light spots and dark spots. It's all about luminance. I don't have to deal with color since it's black and white. It would be hard to achieve the same thing with any of these other things, but luminance range is this perfect tool for this. So if I click on that, I will get this bar. And if I come over to the picture, you notice I have eyedropper. So if I click in the area that I want to keep, so we'll say here, we'll see what it does. If I click on it, it produces a luminance range. And let me turn on the overlay so you can see it. And you can see what's included in there. So I can say, well, no, I wanted to keep more of the whites, the lights, and I wanted to reduce more of the darks by pulling this back. And now you can see my darks are not pink anymore. So it's eliminating the darkest places from the edit things that I've done in my sliders. So let's see what it looks like in real life instead of in the overlay. And this is what it is with the luminance range on. And here's what it looked like without it. You can see how much darker the dark areas got when I turned it off. And I wanted that because I liked the contrast that it gave me. At this point, I could decide if my luminance range is where I want it, or I could try pulling it back even more and see if that was better or worse. I could also mess with the exposure on the light tips and see if I wanted it brighter. I could do that too. So you have a bit better idea. So at this point, I think that I feel like it's pretty much done with the masking area. So I'm going to go ahead and close down my masking area and go back to my basics panel for a minute. Actually, I didn't need to do that, I guess. But what I'm happy with is that I still have so much detail in this white flower petal. So that worked out really well. What I did want to do is I wanted to come up to this bar across here that gives us some options. And I want to choose this healing area. I'm going to click on it. Now, I don't use this area very often because I prefer to do it in Photoshop. But they do have this new eraser tool over here now. And it's been here for a little while, but it is relatively new. I do like this one pretty well for getting rid of these spots. I think it's a good use for that. I'm going to make my brush just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to just paint away that spot. And it took care of that really well. So I'm going to get rid of that one too. And that looks pretty good. So there's another little one there. So I would go through and I would probably touch out anything that I didn't like the looks of. If it got more complicated than that, I would probably go ahead and take it into Photoshop and touch them out there. See, I didn't like that one. Okay. Let's zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, that one's all right. Okay, so we're going to back out. There's a little something over here I don't think I could do a very good job with in Lightroom here, so we'll just leave that one alone for now. The last thing I want to do, well, the next last thing is I want to go into the detail panel and let's give it a little sharpening. You can see in the window here, and I'm just going to pull up the sharpening just a little bit, because I'm not going into Photoshop to sharpen it or anything, so I can do it here. and get rid of some of the noise if I want to. So something maybe like that. And normally I would say it depends on how big your megapixels are on your shot that you're using. Mine's 42, just for, so you know, if you're not shooting a 42 megapixel camera, you may not be able to pull these as far to get it as sharp as you want. Or if you've cropped a bunch of it out and you're using a smaller file. So it's sort of relative to how big your file is, to how far you can pull these sliders. For a great big file like this, I have a lot of leeway that I can pull it without getting too sharp. And I have to pull a little farther to show the sharpening. So just wanted to point it out that if you can't pull yours up to a combination of 93 plus noise reduction at 31, sometimes they say to keep it at about 100 combined. You combine those two numbers. Mine is obviously more than that. You may not be able to go larger like I just did without having maybe a little bit too much. So keep that in mind, that my camera is just shooting a big file. That's why I'm able to do that so easily. The next thing I think I'll do is I'm going to crop this because I don't think all this blurry stuff is necessary. So I'm going to keep the original aspect ratio, and I'm just going to pull it in, make this the center of focus. And in this case, I like those out of focus flowers just because they're there. I wanted just to see the center one sharp. So that's what I have for this one. And in my mind, this one's done. So at this point, does anybody have a question? But anyway, I like these high contrast black and whites. I like them a lot more than the low contrast. Now, there are going to be exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, I would say this would be my preference, is these real high contrast, dark darks, light lights. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll move on to the next one. And this is my next image. And so we were out in California, and it was a very dark and dreary day. But this is underexposed, and I did underexpose it a little bit intentionally because when I'm shooting this situation with the waves and the foam and the stuff on the water, if I lose the detail in this water, you can't get it back, you know? So it's like, I would rather shoot to the right where it's darker, and then so I'll expose to the right, and then I can bring it up in Photoshop as I want, or in Lightroom. So that's why these are pretty dark. It was a dark day, but this is a little dark yet. So I have this picture, and I have, well, I have two pictures. Hold on, I'm frozen here a second. Huh. Well, something's not cooperating. Here we go. All right, let's try that again. I have one and I have two. So I just kept shooting a series of them because as I was shooting, the water would change. And I have a whole series of them, but this is the one that I liked the splash. And on this one, I liked this wave back here. And I didn't mind some of this, but primarily I like the splash and this water down on this one. So how do I get to do both of them together? And that's what I want to show you, is how we can combine this. So I'm going to then I'll go through. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to process these two images. And then we're going to take it into Photoshop and we're going to combine the two into this one. So that's where we're going with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of each one of these. So I right click and then I've got my copy of each one. So I'll choose that one. This one is what we're going to start with. This is my copy. I'm taking it into the develop module. And let's see, checking my notes here, make sure I don't forget anything. All right, so the first thing that I want to do, I mean, this isn't technically a landscape, it's a seascape, but I want to look at my profile, and I'm going to change it to Adobe Landscape. Now, if you don't know which one you want, then try them. Just click through each one, and you can try out and see which one you prefer. We're going to go with this one, and it darkened things, lightened some things, so that's adding contrast. It changed the colors a little bit. If it's a landscape where you have greens and blues, it works on those. So it will do some emphasis on those blues and greens. I'm going to go with this one for now, and I will bring this point up real quick, just so if you're all thinking, why isn't she fixing this? It's driving me crazy. There's two things that I'm not going to fix yet. One of them is, I know the horizon's crooked. I'm not going to fix it yet because I'm going to do a process in Photoshop, and it's just easier if I don't fix the horizon until I get my Photoshop work done. And then I will come back into Lightroom and I'll straighten my horizon then. The other thing is I got dust spots. I did clean my camera lens or sensor, excuse me, but here I have dust spots, and I'm going to go ahead and take care of those in Photoshop too. I just feel like it's easier. So if you're wondering why I don't fix those, I see them. I'm just not going to fix them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit auto. And it lightened it up real nicely, and it did a lot of things that I liked, but it also did some stuff that I didn't really want. So I'm going to just use this as my starting point, and I'm going to pull down that exposure again, like I did before. I'm going to go so it's just about a half a stop up instead of a full stop. And then I can maybe tweak the contrast just a little. It's about right. But I'm watching this water down in the foreground. I want to make sure that it doesn't go too light. And I can, after I get that taken care of, then I'll worry about the other stuff later. But I want to keep this pretty much in check. And then I'm going to drop the shadows just a little bit. It raised them a little farther than I want to start with. Again, I can come back here and make any adjustments. I'm bringing the whites down slightly again because I want to see the detail. I want to see some texture in this white water. And then the blacks, it's okay. Maybe a little bit too dark. So we'll go excuse me, bring that up just a couple things. And then I'm going to bring up the vibrance because I think this could use a bump in vibrance, and even it brought it up to a 2 in saturation. That's fine. So I think this is, I'm liking this so far. I don't think I really want to mess with the tone curve. I'm not going to mess with the HSL or color grading, or right now I'm going to go into Photoshop, so I'm not dealing with the detail or anything. I do check lens correction, make sure the remove chromatic aberrations on. I always want that turned on. Sometimes I will just import things with that already on, which is probably why it's clicked on here, which I'm sure you all know that's that little bright edge that can put on high contrast areas in an image. So the next thing, we don't need to transform anything. I'm not putting any effects on it right now, but I want to introduce this calibration section a minute. And I left it in place because I teach so many classes that I kind of kept it in the place where Lightroom puts it by default. But if you find you're using this a lot, you can move this up so that it's right under the basics panel. So if you find you like it, you might be interested in moving it to where you have a easier access to it. And to do that, you just right click on here, and it gives you, I think it's down here maybe. Well, it's not cooperating. I don't know why. You can rearrange these, and we will work on that later. So I want to look at calibration, and I'm just going to mess with the saturation. I'm not going to mess with the hue at all. Now, it says it's red, green, and blue. That doesn't mean it's the color red, the color green, and the color blue that I'm dealing with the saturation. It's the channel. And a red channel is affecting all the colors. So there's a little bit of red in all colors. There's a little bit of green in all colors, and there's a little bit of blue in all colors. And so as you pull these, you can see different things happening. So if I pull this all the way to 100, you can see, if you look at my image now, I'm just going to turn it off and on. Here's after, here's before. So it really boosted the saturation of some of the colors, and I really like what it's done. I think for now I'm going to pull it back a little bit. But what happens when you use calibration is it doesn't seem to, I'm going to use it for lack of a better word, break the colors. If I went to the HSL pattern and I bumped my saturation by 100 on certain colors, it would do give some artifacting that I wouldn't like. And I call that breaking the colors. So it just doesn't work as well, but it doesn't seem to do the same thing when you're using this calibration section. But for now, let's pull this back, not all the way, but I'm just going to pull it back somewhere around here. And then let's try the greens, and I'm going to pull the greens all the way up to 102. And you can see, again, it does some nice color popping. But again, because we're going to pull up the blue one here in a second, I'm going to pull this back. And you know, these sliders are just to your preference. So look at it, see if you like it, adjust it accordingly. And the same for the blue. And the blue, I find, tends to be more aggressive than some of the other ones. But again, we can pull this back, and we'll go about here. And so now if I turn off the calibration section, here's on, here's after, and here's before. So it just gave us a nice boost of color without some glaring saturation, and it didn't break any of the colors. So I'm going to stick with this one. I think at this point, we've gone through all our panels. Let's go into the masking panel now. And the first thing I want to do is I want to work on this sky. So I'm just going to do a select sky. Give it a second here. It detects it. It's grabbing the boat. I don't really care about the boat. I'm going to get rid of the boat anyway, so I don't care what it does to it. You can see a little bit down in here, but that should be fine. So I want to mess with the contrast and see if I can bring those clouds out and make them more, the texture in them more pronounced. And I can't really see it because the overlay's on. I can uncheck that if I want, or it will just disappear as I start to move a slider. So I wanted to mess with the contrast, not the exposure. So I'm going to pull the contrast up, and I wanted to add a pretty decent amount of contrast. And so if I turn this off and on, you can see that there's been a contrast boost. Okay, so let's also bring up the highlight, or down the highlights a little bit. I don't want to go too crazy with the lightness on the light areas. And I'm going to bring down the blacks. So again, that gives it kind of some dramatic look. Now I'm going with the dramatic look on all this entire edit, and you may not like it, and that's fine. If you don't like it, or if you do like it, it doesn't matter. But what I want you to take away from this is how you can go about achieving what you see in your mind. So different things you can try and why to try them. So the next thing I want to do is I would like to make another selection. And if I really wanted to be nice and organized, I could title everything. So we'll just say drama in the sky. Could have said sky drama, it would have sounded better. Okay, so we're going to do a new mask. And I'm going to do a brush this time. And I'm going to brush on this wave area. So I want to bring out some of the texture and some of the detail that's in this area. So I'm just going to, I have the auto mask on. Let's see how it works. If it stays in the lines, it's gotten so much better than it used to be that I do use auto masks sometimes. I never used to. I always used auto mask to erase things, but now it just does a better job. So I think it will be fine. So again, I'm going to mess with the contrast. I want to bring those shadows out and the highlights out. So I want to increase my contrast by just a little bit. I don't want those highlights to go too far or I'll blow them, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to bring down the highlights. I wouldn't have to go in this order. A matter of fact, what I did when I did this originally is I went to the whites because I thought I did bring up the contrast, but it still is a little dark down here. So I wanted to bring up my whites, and I'm going to pull this up somewhere right around in here. And so you can see it did get brighter before, after. But I don't want to blow those out completely. So then that's when I pull down my highlights just a little bit. So it's kind of a little give and take here. Pull it up, take it down until I get the combination that I like. I'm also wanting to add texture now. I want to just add it to these areas. I didn't want to add it to all the spots right now. So I'm going to bring up my texture just a little bit. It's just a matter of playing and deciding what you want to see. And so I brought up the clarity a little bit too. So now if I turn this off, so here's after, before, after. It's subtle, but it does give it some more definition without overcooking the thing. So that was my thought. I think I could even bring it up a little bit more, but I don't want to overcook it, so we'll just leave it at this point. Now, the next thing I want to do is when I look at this image, this line of the picture is fairly light. It's not the lightest thing, but it's definitely a light edge. So what I would like to do is make a new mask, and I'm going to use a linear gradient, and I'm going to pull it down from the top. And I just want the top little bit to be a little bit darker, and not a lot darker, just a little bit darker. So I'm going to come up in this neighborhood. I'm going to hold my shift key, because then when I pull down my linear gradient, it's going to be a horizontal line. It's not going to be tilted. So I'm just going to pull this down a little bit. If it's not exactly in the right spot, I can move it after the fact. So I can move it up and down, or I can change the fade out. And over here, I'm going to come and I'm going to bring that exposure down just a little bit, not very much, just maybe about a quarter of a stop. So right in there. And so if I turn that off and on, you'll see here's after, there's before, after, before. And if it's too harsh, too abrupt, I can pull this down, and then maybe it's a softer fade. So there's before and there's after. And I'm going to leave it at that for this part of it. So this is the first picture edited, and I'm pretty happy with the way it looks right now. So I'm going to close this up. And now I'm going to go over to the next image. So I'm going to drop down to my little film strip here, and I'm going to go to the copy that I made of the next picture up. And remember, I'm in the develop module. So if I go to the next one, here's my image. Now I can go through and do exactly the same thing that I just did to that other photo, or I can save myself a lot of work. And if you look down here, there's this previous button. If I click it, it will do whatever edits were done to the picture just prior to me opening this one, it will do to this one. So if I would have stopped at another picture before I landed on this one, it wouldn't have given me the edits from maybe where I wanted to get the edits. But this one, I went directly from the one that I wanted to paste the information onto this image. So I'm going to hit previous. It takes just a second, and there it is. So much faster. I didn't have to go through all of it again. But one thing I do need to check is it will copy the information from our masking. And sometimes it can adjust it according to a move, but I think it will not get the waves the way if I hover over this mask, it's not putting the mask where my waves were in the last picture. So those are just out of sync. So I'm going to click on this layer, masks. And if I come down here and see this is the brush, the tool, it shows, if I hover on that, you can see my overlay. If I click on that, I can pull it into place. Now it's not quite lining up. So about the only thing I could do to make it line up, I think, will be just to get rid of it and then reapply it. So that's what we'll do. We will click on here. We have the option to add or subtract. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the overlay so I can see it. I'm going to subtract with a brush, paint it away. This way I don't have to do all the settings over again. I can just use the settings that were already in there from our previous picture. And now I'm going to go back and I want to add with a brush. And I'm going to paint it on this area of water instead. And I may even come up here with it. Okay. So now we have that in place, and so that works. I did want to make one other thing, and that's for this part of the crashing waves. So let's go ahead and create a new one. And I'm going to use an object selection on this one. And I want to lighten this up because you can see now this is lighter and this is a little grayer. So let's just see what kind of selection it makes here. Not bad. Probably good enough for what we're going to do here. So I'm going to bump up that contrast. And about there. And let's, maybe the shadows don't need to be quite as dark as they are. And let's give it just a little more white because it's still a little dark. And yet I want a little bit of contrast. So let's bring that down. So we can use that. And so I think that looks pretty good to me now. Hold on one second. All right. So I think we have both of these pictures edited in Lightroom as far as I want to take them. So I'm going to go back into my grid view. Here's the picture I just edited along with this one. I want to select both of these and I'm going to take them both into Photoshop as one document. So I'm going to do a command click with my cursor over the image. Command click on it. They're both selected. Now I'm going to right click with my cursor on top of one of the images and edit. And then if I go to the right here, you can see some options. I want to go all the way to the bottom, open as layers in Photoshop. And what that does is it puts both layers in the same document in Photoshop. So we'll go over to Photoshop and it's loading. So there's 1 and 2. Okay. So now I'm going to turn off. See, there's the splash and there's the wave. So what will help me usually is to go through and label these, rename them according to what it is that they have in them. So I wanted this one for the sky and for the wave. So I'm going to just double click on the word and I'm going to type in sky and wave and enter. And so I've renamed this one. And then this one is the splash. So I'm just going to double click here and label it splash. Now, the next thing I need to do is I was hand holding. I was not on a tripod. So if you watch the rocks, which didn't move, you'll see that they're slightly askew. So I need to line these up. So the way I do that is I need to select both layers. And so to do that, I've got this one is active. I just need to make this one active at the same time. So I'm going to hit a command and click on it. So both layers are now active. I'm going to go up here to edit, click on it, and I'm going to come down and auto align layers. I'm going to click on it. It's going to find in the image the station, something that looks the same in both pictures, and it's going to align them. And I'm just going to use auto. So I'm going to say, okay. And this will just take a little bit of time. So see how fast it was. And you can see kind of what it's done. Now, I think what this one is really kind of skewed because I think it's because of the horizon line. We're at 2 different angles. So it has fixed that. And if I turn them off and on, turn off the top one, you'll notice that the rocks don't move now like they did. The water moves, but the rocks don't. The clouds moved, that's fine. So now we've got them aligned. And why did I do that? Well, because I want to use part of one of the pictures for the top, the sky and the wave, and the bottom for the other part of the picture. So I'm going to essentially erase this bottom and use the bottom from this picture. So I'm going to now just highlight the top one for you. So it's just active on the one that we can see. I want to put a mask on it. So I'm going to click here. It added a white mask so I can still see everything. I can do it one of 2 different ways. One of them's a little bit faster than the other, but I'm actually going to use a combination of the 2. And so you'll notice too, I didn't fix the spots yet. And that's because I'm going to get rid of this guy on one of them. So I'll wait till I get that all lined out before I get rid of my spots, because why spend the time removing them when you're not going to use it? So I want to use the gradient tool. And so the graduated filter. So that's this right here. So if I click on this or hit the G key, it puts a gradient tool on my cursor. You can see it's a little plus sign. And I just need to decide what I want to save from this picture and where I want to get rid of it. So right through here is my dividing line. And I have black as my foreground color, which means black conceals, the white reveals. It's white now, so it's revealing everything. I want to conceal the bottom. So I want full black over this wave. Well, it's going to be harder to splash. So it's going to be kind of hard to get full black and then go into this wave because of the angle. So I can go back and paint out what I don't get, but I'm going to start right about here and I'm going to click. I'm going to drag up, and I could use that same technique of holding the shift key if I wanted to get a perfectly horizontal line, which it doesn't really make that much difference. And I'm going to release it. And I'm going to zoom in here so you can see it a little bit better. And you'll notice I have this little line, 2 dots with a line, and I can mess with this. And if you look, you can kind of see something happening over here to the side when I pull this. And I'm going to show you what that looks like by showing you my mask. So this red area is the area that's masked. And I got that by hitting my backslash key. So if you want to use that and you don't know how I got it, it's the backslash key that's to the right of the bracket keys. And I can pull and push these as I want in order to get the fade out area to be the way that I want it. But also notice there's this little diamond here. And this is neat because if you click on it, you can adjust the fade too, about how fast it fades and where it starts to increase its fade. So I can pull this to accommodate different scenarios that I want as far as the fade off factor. So we'll just leave it at this point. I'm going to get rid of the red so we can see it again. And you'll notice that I've got some of that splash from the bottom, excuse me, from the top photo, and then not quite all of it from the bottom. So what I'd like to do is alter this mask just a little bit more. So I'm going to get my brush tool. Again, I want the black on there. So I'm going to paint out the area I don't want anymore. So I'm going to make sure that I've got 0% hardness. I want a nice soft feather on it. And I'm going to come over here and get rid of the rest of the background layer so that I can bring forward the underneath layer. So now I've got all my splash. And now I want to get rid of this. So I'm going to switch over and paint this. Oops, I went the wrong way. Paint this away. So I got rid of the splash that I didn't want from this top layer. And now I'm showing all of the splash from the bottom layer. So I've just sort of altered that mask shape, and you can see what the mask now looks like. So now I have an image that has both components in it that I wanted. It has a few other things going on here that we need to fix though, and one of them being this line. So that doesn't look great. Well, we'll still have the mask area highlighted. I want to take my brush tool that I have on there now, and I want that soft feather on the edge of it. And I'm just going to simply come over and I want to knock off that hard edge. So I want to be at 100% opacity to get rid of a hard edge. And then I can soften it up and kind of play with blending it all together. And I don't want that boat in there because I don't like its placement. It's too far away and it's off to the side, or at least that's my thinking. So I'm going to just paint that away. And if you want to feather it a little bit more out so it blends a little bit easier, you can. So that's good. All right. So now it's time to say, I think it's pretty good. It's not over on this side, but we don't have to worry about that. We'll get rid of that with the crop. So we'll just ignore that. And if you can't, we'll just push it over there so you don't have to see it. But what I want to do is now get rid of the spots. And so I'm ready to do that. So first, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to combine these layers. And I could just merge it down because I'm pretty sure that it's good enough to go. But I could also do what they call a visible stamp. And a visible stamp is hitting the Shift, Alt, Command E. And I will hit it. And now you'll notice it built a new layer above it. So it took these two, kept them separate, and combined it into one on this particular layer. So if I turn these off, no difference. It's the same thing. You can still see the entire image. All right, so now I want to go in. I'm going to zoom in so I can see closer. And I'm going to go up here. And I'm going to grab, you can get one of these tools and you can try the spot healing brush. And they have the new remove tool. We'll go with the remove tool for now. And I'm going to make it bigger than my spot. And I'm just going to click. Now you'll notice that it didn't go away. And the reason for that is, and I'm going to have to bring this down so I can see it. I'm sorry, just so you know, when the zoom bar is up here at the top and I can't see through it. So I have this unchecked, remove after each stroke. So that means I can do all the selecting the areas that I want, and then all at the same time, I'll hit the check mark and it'll fix them all at once. Now you don't have to do that. You can have this checked and it'll remove after each time you release your click, but you have to sit and wait for it. And I know it's a matter of a couple seconds, but if you don't want to wait for it, you can just select them all and do them all at one time. So I'm just going to go through here, and I kind of try to do this methodically so that I make sure that I have covered all of the different parts of my image, looking for sensor dust. This I think is cloud, but if it bothers me, I may come back and correct it. I think this is part of the cloud too, but we'll just remove it. And I'm going to go through here. Now I noticed when I was there working on it that they look like there's a big spot here. And I don't know if it's a spot or if the sky was like that. I'm going to deal with that in a different way if it bothers me, but you may have seen it too. I think we've got all of the, well, there's something. All right, so I'll zoom back out, and then I'm going to hit the check mark, and it will process that just a little bit. And this is what I don't like waiting for after every single click. So that's why I do them all at one time, or a bunch of them at a time. All right. So you can see this sort of looks like a spot. So if it bothers me, I could try clicking out of that one. And there's a line or something going on there. So there, that one's pretty good. I'm going to go into the patch tool on this other one. And I'm going to find that little line. It just almost, it could have been raining over there. I don't know exactly what it was doing. And see how that looks. I don't think it helped. So I think for now I'm going to leave it, but I would mess with that until I was happy with it. Here we go. So let's back off here a little bit. All right. So the next thing I want to do, and you may have noticed, when I zoomed in, there's some noise in the sky. So I was shooting at a fairly high ISO, I think, because I was hand holding and it was kind of dark, and I just wanted to catch the splashes. So anyway, what I want to do is run it through some denoise, and I have a couple, 2 or 3 different softwares. If you don't have bad noise, you can run it through Lightroom software, but I don't particularly choose that as my first. And I could go into Filter and Topaz Labs and do denoise. That's my favorite as opposed to Photo AI, but you could go either way. The one thing, if I were going to do Topaz, is Topaz does it to whatever the layer is that you're on. So I would make a copy. So that's why I backed out of that for now. And I'm going to come over here. This is my merged layer, merge and remove a layer. And so I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to go ahead and make another copy by doing a Command J. There's other ways to do it. This is the fastest way. And now I could take this in to Topaz Labs, and I would go to denoise and remove my noise on that. Another one that I do tend to like better if I don't have a lot of noise, and I'll show you just in case you haven't been exposed to Nick at all, but DxO is a company that now makes Nick collection, and I used Define 2 for years. So this is another option, and when it's little amounts of noise, I will sometimes use it because it's fast, it doesn't sharpen, and then I can control the sharpening a little bit easier. Here's the before, here's the after on this one. It does pretty good. Most of the time, it's not 100%, but you know what? This would not show in a print or in on screen, really. So I'll go ahead and accept this one. And what it does, it just automatically did it. I didn't have to do anything to it. It's saving it back. It saves it back on its own layer. So I wouldn't have had to make a copy if I were going to use Define 2. If I wanted to go back in though and do the Topaz, hit denoise, I'll open up here. And on the right-hand side is where it has processed it. And on the left is the, before. So before, after. One thing I would like to do is look down at the close-up and see what denoise did to my water splash and see if I liked it. I can zoom in here if I want to look at it closer, just so that I can see what it's doing to the splashes. It's getting a little crunchy, is the way I call it. It's on its model here, so I could reduce the sharpness and see if I liked what it did there. Noise is going to mess, or denoise of any kind is going to mess with this area because it reads it as noise. And so it's just a matter of finding the thing that you like the best. Now I could go ahead and choose this, and we'll say that I did, and we'll say I left some sharpness going on in the rest of the picture. I could paint away this area so that I didn't have the denoise happening on my splash. So if I went ahead and applied it, I would apply it to the entire picture. And now it's over here. So this is my denoise. And if I zoom in here and see how I like the splash and see if it bothers me what it's done, I'll turn it off and on. If it's good to go, then I can leave it. If I don't like it, I could put a mask on here and make sure I have black, get a brush, and I could paint it out. And so then it wouldn't be affected at all. And I could just go through this entire area and remove the processing of that software. I'll just turn it off for now. So I'll get rid of that one so I don't have to mess with it. And so I'll use the sharp or the denoise from this one. And you can see it didn't do the same kind of thing with the splash. So it's, which do you like better? I could paint it off of this one too. I could put a mask on here and paint some of it off if I chose to. I won't do that for now. So I'm going to back out of this. I think it's fine, actually. And so I think at this point, that's pretty good. So what I want to do is I want to add something else. And I want to add kind of another means to sharpen. And I'm going to need to wrap this all into one image I can either flatten it or I can do one of those visible stamps again. So I'm going to do the visible stamps so I don't lose my layers. Shift, Alt, Command, E, or Shift, Option, Command, E, if you're on a Mac, and I guess it would be Shift, Alt, Control, E on a PC. And it made this layer. So we'll just call this a blend layer. And now what I want to do is I want to add some micro contrast. I'm going to zoom in just a touch so you can see it a little bit better, what's going to happen. And I have an action for this, and I'm going to tell you how to create this on your own. I got this as a free action from David Kingham. He offered it years ago. He doesn't still have it on his website, so I can't give you the link to it, but I can show you how to do it without having this action. And you can create your own action. You can watch this back and create your own action. But I have it in this actions panel. If I click on it, it's called micro contrast. And it does kind of a neat thing. It has to have that blend layer. I'm going to go back to my layers panel now. And if you watch the image, as I click it off and on, here's after, and kind of watch the details down in here. So here's after, here's before. It just adds some sharpness. So it's off and it's on. It just gives it a little pop that I like. And so I don't throw it on everything. And sometimes I will apply it selectively. In other words, I would put a mask on and either paint it out of areas that I don't want it or paint it into areas that I do when I have a black mask on. So you can go either way. But this micro contrast is kind of cool, and you can create an action for yourself if you would like to. And here's what is involved. So I'm going to just turn that off for now, and I'm going to go up to actions. And there's this little 4 lines over here. I'm going to click on it. And right now, if you've never used actions before, it's essentially a way to automate a process that you use repeatedly. So if it's something that you like to do, it's how you can automate it so you don't have to go step by step through it. You can make one, you can buy them, whatever the case. In this case, it's pretty simple that we can make one. And so to make one, you can't be in this button mode. And button mode is what you see here, where it's just the title and some colors added to it. If I uncheck that, you can now see this is what it looks like out of button mode. And this is telling you step by step what it's doing. So I'm going to create a new action. And to do that, I need to come over here. So I clicked on those 4 lines, I come down, new action. Now you can also make a set. So if you wanted to say, I'm going to put a bunch of actions that I made in my own set, I could make a set first and say Jackie's actions in the title and say, okay. And then I'm going to come back and make an action. So now I'm going to make this action. I'm going to click new action. It opens a screen. You just title it what you want. And I'm going to say, I think I've already used, I'll do demo in micro contrast. Oops, I can't spell. And left out a few letters. Okay, micro contrast. I can say it, I guess. Micro contrast, so demo micro contrast. And I'm going to put it in Jackie's actions because I have pre-made that before because I already have one. And you can add it, function keys to it. You could add a color to it. So like those were colored purple, gold, black. I could put a color on it. So we'll say blue. And I'm going to hit record. Now it's recording everything that I actually physically do, clicking buttons, not my voice, but buttons. And you can look down here and you can see the record button is on. So if I go back over to my layers, as I walk through the process of clicking different buttons and keys throughout the process, it records those all. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I want to tell it to do is I want to duplicate the layer. So to do that, I'm going to do a Command J. So you'll see it duplicated the layer. And now I want to go to Unsharp Mask. And you will find that if you go to Filter, click on Filter, I'm going to go down to sharpen. If I go over now, here is unsharp mask. I'm going to click on that. It's going to open this window. So now I just have to fill in the amounts, and I was preparing this for you. So my amounts are already filled in, but I would make this a 20. So you can click on it and type in the 20, click on this, type in 60.0. Your threshold is still at 0. And now that I have that, I say, okay. It remembers that. It applied it to this extra layer that I just had made. And now I need to come up here and I need to change this blend mode to luminosity. So I'm going to go down. I click on it. It now has recorded that. The next thing I want to do is come up to this layer that I've been working on. I'm going to right click, or I'm going to double click on it. It opens this layers thing. So it opens it to blending options. This is what I want. And I want this blend if to say gray. My current layer, I need to mess with this one first. And I need to set the black end. You can see this is the black end. So I need to pull my little arrow here until it reads 10. It says 0 now. I want to pull it till it reads 10. All right. And now I need to, that's the minimum. And so I need to set a maximum here. And so I need to separate this little arrow. And to do that, I just hold down the Option button or the Alt button. I click it and I want to drag the right-hand side. So now I click and drag, see they separate. And I want to bring this up to 50. See that number clicking up? And we're almost to 50. There it is. Okay. And so I'm going to release it. And now I need to look at my white side. So that's over here. Again, it's got the arrow. It says 255. That's describing the white. And so I need to split this off because I need my minimum to go to 200. So to split that arrow, I have to hit the Alt or Option button, click on it, drag the left side to 250. And I'm going to, well, it's 249. Let's fix that. There we go. And there's 250. And now this one says 255. That's my maximum. So that's where I want that. So that's good. And so now I'm going to look at this underlying layer bar. And you'll notice that my black says it's at 0. I want to leave that there. Now, I didn't make this up. I'm just David Kingham did, and it works great. And so I'm just filling this in for you. And then the white stays at 255. We don't have to do anything to this bottom underlying layer. We are good to go. So I'm going to say, okay. And then the next step and last step is to rename this. And I'm going to rename it demo, because that's what I named my action. So I'm going to say demo micro contrast. And then I'm going to say, okay. And we're done with the actions. So I need to go back to the actions panel and I need to stop. So I stop the recording. And so now here's that action right here. And it's open. So you can see every step that I've made. And if you open them, you can see the information. And so on. So that's where it is. Now, if I go back up here to this, go back to button mode, then it's in the color where you just don't see all that. It's easier to find it. And there's my demo micro contrast. So my suggestion would be after you make it, then do a test on it. So let's go back here, get rid of this. I'm going to delete that layer. And we're going to give this a test. So we're going to come back to actions, go to demo micro contrast, click on it. Fast as that, it did it. Layers, come over here. You turn it off, you turn it on. Now, if it's doing more than you want, you like it, but it's doing a little too much, you can pull down the opacity and adjust it according to what looks good to your eye. Or you can mask it away, as I told you before, mask it away, mask it in, mask it out, whatever you want to do. It's a real handy little thing that was given away. And so I'm spreading the love, so to speak, if you want to do it. So at this point, I am ready to take this back into Lightroom and finish it off because it's just about done. So I am going to save this back. So I'm going to hit a Command or Control S. And it should be saving it here. Pull this up so you can see the bottom of my screen. It is still saving it, so just a second, and it'll be back over in Lightroom. And it was a fairly good size file because I have 2 different files and I didn't delete any of them. So it was fairly good size. I didn't look to see how big it was to begin with. Okay, so it's done now. So I'm going to back over to Lightroom. And it should be here. Here it is, highlighted. So now we just need to finish off. And I want to take this back into the develop module. And it needs to be cropped and straightened. So I'm going to go to crop. And first thing I'm going to do is straighten the horizon. There we go. And so I just used auto. And so now I want to crop it down. So I think this would look nice. Get rid of some of the sky. We don't need all of that sky. I'm going to go to a 16:9 crop ratio. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to pull it down. I want to keep the bottom. And I want to get rid of this side. So I'm going to pull it in until I get rid of as much sky as I want and as much as that left side. And it is done. And so here is our image that we just walked through all the different. And now at this point, you could decide whether you think it's too dark, it's not dark enough. Do you want to put a vignette around the edge to darken the side or the corners a little bit, or is it good to go? And you can continue working on it if you choose to. If you do not have software to do your noise reduction, you could come over here to detail and you could choose your area that you want to look at. We'll say here, and you could go ahead and work with your noise reduction here by pulling these sliders. All right. So that's what I had on this image. Are there any questions? See, this was a little bit more involved. A lot of things to take in, but how about any questions? No? You guys, I'm sitting in the dark here. I'm going to turn a light on real quick, and then I'll get back to you.
Jackie,
Yes.
This is Jay. Yeah. I do have a question. When I edit, I really don't get involved with contrast as much as I do with clarity. Is there a reason, or can you explain the difference between contrast and clarity?
Contrast is working on, when looking at this picture, contrast, to my understanding, is working on all the darks and all the lights within the image, where clarity is working on the edge contrast. So it will, like, contrast will mess, if we zoomed in, say, to this, oops, to this wave, and I did contrast, it would mess with all the pixels. If I did clarity, it'll only mess with the ones that are right on the edges of contrast change.
Could we do an example of that?
Sure, let me
the way I've heard that explained, Jackie, is that clarity works on the gray, the midtones, which gets to exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. So that's good to know a little bit more information. So we'll test this out. So let's see, how do I want to do this? I think what I'll do is I'll select this little area. So I use a brush and I'm going to select, got to get rid of this. So let's just select this area and just work on a little bit at a time. So, okay. So now if we come over here and we do contrast, let's see how, okay, so that's what that looks like. So let's label this. And I'm going to turn that off. And now let's leave it on for just 1 minute. I'm going to get another box. I'm going to take another brush. Try to draw it in the same spot. That's why I left it on for now. Okay. All right, so now let me turn this one off. And let's go down here to clarity. See if I can get it about the same. So now let's see if we can flip back and forth between the two and see. There's clarity, contrast. I'm not sure this is the best way to show it. There's clarity, contrast. I think clarity is a little how do I want to say it? Punchy. Oh, I don't know how to describe what I'm thinking. It's a little softer, a little more even, and the other one's more of a harsher, but it's similar in this particular instance anyway. It may change in different areas. Let's just try a different area and see what happens here. So there's wave contrast up to 55-ish, 56. Okay, let's try the same area again. And this will be so I'll turn this one off. This one's on. So you can see when I go up to about the same number, this one gets a lot more intense than the contrast did at the same point. There's contrast, clarity. So they're similar. I think this clarity is just a little bit edgier, a little crunchier.
I've always felt that clarity gave more pop to what you're working with.
Which is, yeah, kind of what we're showing here. So,
but
yeah.
necessarily, I wouldn't be pulling it over that far either, you know. So anyway.
Yeah, and clarity, I tend to use probably 20 and below. I don't go too high with clarity.
Absolutely. It's always in a lower setting than that.
Yeah, usually just a little. And you know what? If you do like, there was Serge Ramelli, he would always pull his highlights all the way down to 0 and his shadow all the way up.
Yep.
And then you don't need contrast because that's doing it for you too.
That's right. That's a good point.
So, yeah, did that help at all?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Okay. So, are you ready for one more? The next one is a little involved, so it's the next step up as far as complexity goes, and maybe as far as yeah, I just want to give people that are more experienced with Photoshop a little bit more to think about and try, not always to show only basic stuff. So anybody that wants to stick around, I know it's 8:30 already. This one's probably going to take a little while. If it's too beyond you, feel free to cut out, but I will go ahead and show you the next one for anyone that wants to expand and see what else can be done. And I do think it's good, even if you don't think that you're at the skill level to do this next one, it's good to know what you can do when you're ready to try it. And I think this one's kind of I've used it several times. I think it works out well, but it also gets into some more detailed information. We are going to work on this picture. And what it is, let me go over what you're seeing a little bit before I show you where we're going to go with this. I took this is, if you've never seen this tree, it's a pretty famous tree. It's on the 7 Mile Drive in Pebble Beach in California. And I'm standing right at a fence, and there's all these shrubs right in front of me, and I'm too old to climb over that fence and get down where I needed to be, because I don't really like that this tree is cut in the middle by the horizon. So when I look at this picture, I was blessed with a beautiful sky that night, but the tree is in the middle of, or is being cut in the middle by that horizon line. And that's kind of a negative in my opinion. So it's like, gosh, I was bummed. I knew it was when I took it, but I couldn't do anything about it. I couldn't get lower because I would have been behind the bushes. I couldn't go out and lower myself because it was a fence, because it's a slope down to the ocean. So anyway, we're going to do it in post, and I'm going to take, and what I want to do is put this tree up above the horizon. So the next picture shows the edit that I made in Lightroom. So I went from this point to this point in Lightroom. So it's very doable to spruce up your picture just in Lightroom. But at this point now, I taken it over into Photoshop, and I don't want to show that one. And this is the picture that I have, and where I've moved it up and I've messed with it a little bit more. And I may have taken it a little too far with some of the lightning I did at the last minute before class started. But in this, I know exactly what the problem is here. I need to go in and turn that off. Okay. So this is full frame, and this is cropped. So you can choose what you want to do. But right now I want to go back and get my original here, and I want to go, this is my straight out of camera. I want to make a copy of it, and I'm going to develop it in Lightroom. So we are going to make a virtual copy by right-clicking, create virtual copy. And here we go. We're ready to start the development in the develop module. And I am also, when we get through, when we're in Lightroom, excuse me, when we're in Photoshop, I'm going to show you another little technique that you can add to something new. Oh, you'll see several different ones, but actually I'm going to show you another action you can make. All right, so the first thing I want to do is go up to my basic panel, and I really don't want to do too much globally to this image, because I decided I want to affect selectively where I put my edits. But I do want to go to my color profile up here, and I'm going to select Adobe Landscape, and you'll see it does a nice job of increasing the saturation in the greens and in the blues and the sky colors. So I think this is a good starting point. I don't want to do anything, like I said, globally in this area or with my coloring, but I do want to mess with the texture. I'd like all the textures throughout the image to be bumped up. That isn't always the case with me. Sometimes I will choose to do that selectively also. In this particular picture, I just decided I'd go ahead and do it globally. So I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to pull my clarity up just a little bit to give it a little bit of pop to start with. And I want to make the vibrance go up just a little bit. So let's pull that up. And I'm going to pull up my vibrance significantly. Generally, when I do pull up my vibrance, a lot of times I'll go up into the 30 or 40 range, but I don't generally go beyond 45 or so. I mean, there may be a special occasion, but I kind of keep it towards the lower end. And at this point, the only other thing I really want to do over here is come into lens correction, make sure my remove chromatic aberration is on. And now I'm going to go into my masking area and I'm going to do selective edits. So I want to mess with that sky. I think it's a beautiful sky, but it needs a little bit more oomph. So I want to do a select sky. And it's detecting it. There we go. You can see it did a great job of picking it out. And what I want to do is I want to add just some warmth to that. So I'm not going to do it right now, but I would rename that warmth, add warmth. And I'm going to pull up my temperature to about here. I think that looks pretty good to me, but I also want to pull up my saturation. So let's go here. So if I turn this off and on, here's after, here's before, after. Now what this has done is it's colored the entire sky with warmth. And I kind of liked the play of the blue in the blue areas against the warmth of the clouds that was reflecting the sunlight. And so I kind of like to keep the blue. So how could we go about that? Well, if I come to these three dots and I click, I can use an intersect mask with, and I'm dealing with color now. So I'm going to use color range. I'm going to click on color range and it opens this panel. And what I want to do is if I move my cursor over into the picture, you'll notice I've got an eyedropper. And I just click a point, I'm going to click here. You can now see that anything that is that exact color that was under the tip of my eyedropper has been selected and it's in the pink. Well, it didn't select as much as I really would have liked for it to. So I'm going to undo this because I want to do it a different way so I can get more hues of the color included in this color range. So I'm just going to undo, which means I'm going to have to go back to my three dots, intersect, and come back to color range. Now I'm going to come into this cloud with this lovely range of apricot colors, and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out a rectangle. And now, once it detects everything, you can see all the different areas as I hover over it that are now being affected by what this, what my sliders are doing. So if I look at it and I turn it off, and what I want to turn off is this color range section. So this is where I've added the color range part to it. So if I turn it off, you can see it affecting the blue area. And I turn it back on, you can see where it's not affecting the blue area. It's just putting warmth on the warm areas. So that's what I wanted it to do. And the other thing is this refine area. Now I'm going to turn the overlay on so you can see what it's doing. This is what is being affected by this, this mask that I created. And it's default here at 50. If I slide this, you can see that it will adjust the amount of overlay you see, which is the amount that's being affected. So if I pull it away from 50, say to like 45, then it's going to affect a little bit less. So if I pull it up to say 60, it's maybe affecting a little bit more. So you can decide at what point it looks good to you. And I'm going to go ahead for this instant. It's leave it at 50. I want to show you what this looks like if you don't see the overlay. So again, I'm going to pull this down And you can see how the warmth is being restricted more when I come this way. And as I pull it forward, it's affecting more areas. And it's subtle, but it does make a difference. So I'm going to leave this where it was at 50 for this instance. And the next thing that I want to do is I would like to put some more blue in the blue area. So I want to bump up the blues. And so I'm going to come up and create another mask. I'm going to do another select sky. And this time I want to intersect with a color range mask. So I'm going to click intersect mask with color range. And what I want to do is I want to click on the area that I want the color. So I'm going to come up here and I kind of want an area that's getting the light areas and the darker areas. So I'm going to click and drag out a rectangle. And you can see now what it's affecting. All the pink areas are going to get the effect that I do on the sliders. So I'm going to go down here to my color temp and I'm going to pull it to the left and I'm going to come down until I kind of like the color that I'm seeing. So we'll do about there. And we can also play with this refine edge thing. So it's at 50 again. If I pull it back and you watch the blue, you'll see that it starts to change the area that it's affecting. And if you can see it better, I'll turn this on. As I pull it down, you can see that it starts to pull away. As I get the smaller numbers, it pulls away from the orange, lets more warm areas not be affected. And if I come the other way, it starts affecting more of those apricot colored colors, peachy colors. So I'm going to pull this down so that it's just affecting maybe the blue areas. So just a little bit here. So I'm pretty happy with that one. So I'm going to turn off the overlay. So that looks pretty good to me. So the next thing I do, I'm looking at my image and I think, well, this has got a lot going on. I'd like something here. I love the look of that water because it's got that really beautiful aqua look to it. So I want to see if I could do something down there that actually brings our eye back down towards the tree, because the tree is the highlight of this picture. So we need to get our head out of the clouds, so to speak, and bring it back down towards the tree. It's not on the tree, I know, but I think it'll still get you back down toward it. And it's pretty colors. So I want to create another mask. This time I'm going to do a radial gradient. And so I'm going to come over here and just draw out an oval. Maybe not quite that big. And I'm going to kind of park it right over the water. And I want to then make sure that I have a feather of about 100. So I want this to be very feathered. I can always adjust it if I want. Let's make that a little smaller. All right, and so I would like to start messing with the exposure. I'm going to bring up the exposure because I think it would be nice if we lightened it a little bit. So let's try here. If it's too much or too little, I can adjust it later, but I think that looks good to start with. And then I'm going to add some contrast. So I want to bring out the lights and darks, but I don't, when I do that, it's already pretty light down here. Let's kind of zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to bring up my contrast a bit. So if we turn this, it's on, now it's off. You can see where we're going. But it really kind of is bringing my highlights up. I like what it's doing to some of the aqua colored water, but the highlights are getting a little too light. So I'm going to bring my highlights down right in that area. And then the shadows weren't bad. I might bring those up just a touch. Whites, this is the white slider. I like the white slider. It's kind of my happy, I call it the happy slider. I think it just adds life and liveliness to an image. You got to watch it in your histogram, but we still got room to play. We got this little gap here. So I know we're not close to blowing them out, but I want to make sure I don't blow anything out, but I still have room to pull it up a little bit. So I'm going to pull this over just a little brighter. And then I don't think I'm going to mess with the blacks, but I am going to come down to the saturation and pull that up because I want that aqua to really look aqua. I don't want it to go overboard, but maybe right in there. And so now I can look at this and turn it off and on and see if I took it too far or if it looks good to me. So again, this is something for you to decide on your own, maybe back up and decide if it's a little too light, maybe we need to drop the highlights a little more or drop the whites. So we could do that, make those adjustments. So now the next thing I do, I'm looking at my image as a whole, and I think I would like to add another filter. And when I look at this image, the foreground is pretty, and I got a lot of detail in there, and the light was raking over it. So you get some of these lights and darks, which is nice for a lot of things. But I feel like because of its closeness to the viewer and things like that, it might be a little light and just pulling me away from the tree. And I want all my focus to go on that tree if at all possible. So I think what I'm going to do is darken this. Again, I can always change it if I make it and I don't like it. It's not locked in until I take it over to Photoshop. So I'm going to go up to create a new mask, and I'm going to do a linear gradient. And so at this point, I can pull up like we did on that other one. If I want to make it a straight line, I just hold down the shift key as I pull up. So I'm going to start it maybe about here. I'm going to hold down the shift key and click and drag it up till about right there. And now you can't see anything, but again, and once I start moving these sliders, it goes away. So if I drop the exposure down here, now I'm kind of seeing the effect. I tend to look past this growth down here a little bit more, and I'm looking more towards the tree. So I'm going to continue to bring down some of the highlights. Those are catching my eye a little bit. Now, if you don't agree, then you wouldn't have to do this. But this is what I had chosen for this particular case. I'm going to bring the shadows down a little bit. I'm just darkening the whole thing, although I don't want it to go totally dark. So believe it or not, I'm bringing up the whites just a little bit. I've kind of lowered the contrast just a little bit, but I still have detail in there. So I'm going to stop at about this point. And at this point, I really think I'm done with my edit inside Lightroom. So I'm ready to go over to Photoshop. So I'm going to close my masking down, and I'm going to head over to Photoshop by clicking a Command E, and it will open over in Photoshop. There it is. All right. So now we're going to get into some of the move things that we were going to get into here. So what we want to do first is I have my background layer. And the first thing I want to do is I want to make a copy. That's kind of a practice that I try to remember to do with each and every picture that I edit in Lightroom, in Photoshop. That way, if I need my original background layer intact, I still have it. And so I make a copy, and I will work on the copy and leave my background layer alone in case I need it. If I don't need it, I can go ahead and get rid of it at any point in time. But I'm going to make a copy by doing a Command or Control J. And a lot of times it'll label this background copy. Why it didn't, I don't know, but it didn't. So that's step one. Step two is I would like to take and I want to enlarge this. So I need to cut out this foreground area plus the tree. So what I'm going to do, and the first thing I think I'm going to do is I'm going to fix that spot because it's bothering me. So I'm going to come over here and I'll just do the remove tool. And okay, take care of. Now, the next thing is I'm going to zoom in so I can see this a little bit easier. And there are several ways that you could select this foreground. And you all might be thinking, well, just select subject. It's in this little pop-up bar that I have pinned down here so it doesn't move around because it bothers me when it keeps getting in my way. And if you don't know, you just click here and you can select pin bar into place. So you can pull it where you want it and then click there to pin it, or you can let it move itself around by unclicking that. But so anyway, if I click on select subject, you'll see that it just selected the tree, and that's not all I wanted. So that didn't work. So I'm going to undo that. Now, the next option would be to come up here to some of our selection tools. And we have an object selection, we have a quick selection, and a magic wand. I'm going to just save time and tell you it didn't work. So it didn't get me what I wanted to, and it was taking too much time. So that wasn't the answer either. I won't go through them all. Just trust me on this one. It didn't work. So the next one is just simply to draw a circle around my area that I want to do. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So I went and got my lasso tool. I want this one. There are others in this tab. So if you don't see it, it's the one at the top. So just click and hold for a second. It'll open the flyout. We want the lasso tool. And I'm going to start over here on the edge, and I'm going to just draw a quick loose circle or area around the thing that I want to move to a new layer. So I'm going to click right at the edge, and I'm going to draw this loose, and I want to keep this white water in there. So I'm holding my click down, and I'm just coming over here. And now when I get over here, I want to get close, but it doesn't have to be right on it. So I'm just going to do, again, a loose circle or a loose selection around here. And I'm going to come down, come over, and oops, I got a little oops there. I did that intentionally because I want to show you something. All right, so now when I get to this corner, I can continue to drag up to my meeting point where I started, or it will just meet up on its own. So when I get in a straight line with it, I know if I release my click, it will just finish it off by itself. So it saves some effort, and it would have been very fast if I didn't explain that. I did this intentionally because I wanted to show you, because this happens easily. When you're drawing these selections with this lasso tool, sometimes you don't draw a straight line and it's like, oh, you need to add something in. How do you do it? Well, now what I'm going to do is hold the shift key down, which means plus. You'll see a plus was added just to the right of that little lasso icon. And if I click and I drag around this area back, and now I let go of my click, and there it's all back, and I've got the entire area now in there. So I've got this area selected. What do I want to do with it? Well, I want to treat it separately from the rest of the picture. So I want to make a copy of the selected area and have it on its own layer. So I'm just going to do a Command or Control J, and you'll notice now that I have a new layer, and we'll just label this foreground. And if I turn off the other two layers, you can see that I only have that foreground in this layer. The thing is, you'll notice that I have water I don't just have the tree, I have water, I have sky, I have whatever. So we're going to have to fix that. And that's going to be the most time consuming thing in this edit. But what I want to show you first is I'm going to turn my background back on. And I want to make this foreground, the tree, bigger. So to do that, I've got my foreground active. I want to use the transform tool. So to get to the transform tool, I always use shortcuts. You can go up to the main menu and find it in edit, but I'm going to just use the shortcut, which is a Command or Control T. We have our transform frame on there now. And I'm just simply going to go to one of the handles and I'm going to pull it up until I get it to the size I want it. Now, what I'm doing is just seeing when these branches just come above the mountains in the background. And when I look at this, I don't know that it looks out of proportion or unusual. It looks like I just have stepped closer to the tree and got the angle that I wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and accept this. So I have to go up to the top and hit my check mark. So I could have hit the enter key for this, but so it's up there now in the sky, and now we have water in the sky. So we do have to fix that. So that's our next step, is to go in and fix it. Now, I'm going to zoom in so you can see it, because see what I do. To do this, I'm essentially going to mask out the part that I don't want to see. I could use the eraser tool, which is right here. And if I came over here and I could make it bigger or smaller, I'm using the bracket keys to change the size of the brush. I can erase and take care of it that way. But when I get into these tight areas, it's going to be hard to do without taking away some of the stuff I want to keep, like the tree itself, you know. So the eraser tool really isn't the answer. It does work. It's just it's going to be a lot more effort to get good results. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to have the brush tool, and I want to put the mask on here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a white mask on by just clicking this icon. So that means we're seeing the entire tree. We're not seeing the background. We're not dealing with the background right now. So I'll just turn it off for a minute. We'll be turning it off and on just so we can work with it. But for now, you can really see what we've got going on. So I want to get rid of some of the different areas, this blue area, this peachy colored area, and so on. And if you notice, I described it in color. So could we get rid of just a color? If we can, that would work really neat. So yes, you can. So that's what we're going to do. So what we need to do is we're going to go up to select. We're going to come to color range. Does that look familiar? We had it in Lightroom. It's a little different over here. And I cannot use it in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom to do the same thing because I can't enlarge it the same. So we're going to use it here. So I'm going to click on color range. Oops, I'm going to cancel for a second. That was a mistake that I may make again and again, but I want to show you why I did not get my picture all of a sudden disappeared. It's because I was on the mask layer and not the pixel layer. I need to select the pixel layer. Now it's active. Now I go up to select, and now I go to color range. And now my picture stays there. So let's look at this window for a minute. You'll see up here sampled colors. That's what I want to use. It gives you the option of selecting blues and yellows and so on. But you know what? If I did yellows, I may not get all of the sky because it's got red mixed in with it. And if I use greens, it's going to get all the greens because there's yellow in with it. So I'm going to use sampled colors. And this fuzziness adjusts how much is selected of an area, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. And then down here, this selection and image. This refers to the view you have here. So in this window, I'm going to see what's being selected, or I could do the image. So now I can see this big. So it's a matter of preference. Which do you like better to see in the little window versus the big window? I'll go ahead and leave it there, because then on the other hand, you could come down here and this is doing whatever it's doing to this. So I can leave it at none and you see my picture, or I could go to a black matte and it looks like this. So I'm going to leave this the way I had set up, none, and then I'm going to see the area that's being masked here. If I wanted to reverse that, I could. The other thing is I have this eyedropper. That's the other thing that I'm using. So you'd click on it. So it's not being selected here. I click on it, it's selected. All right. Now you've kind of got a little bit of an idea about this. So I want to go over here and let's say we want to get rid of the water where we want it. Now, when we look at this image, we don't want to get rid of all of the water. We just want to get rid of the water that's going to be in the way. That's not, so we want to get rid of it kind of down in this area. And I'll have to turn on the background layer so we can see exactly where we want to erase it. But for right now, let's choose a place where it's blue, and I'm going to click. Now, this one sadly does not have where you can, that I know of, where you can pull out and get a box of assorted shades of blue. I just can sample a point, and you'll see that it picked everything that was the color under the tip of the eyedropper. If I want to increase this, I can move my fuzziness up, and if I move it a lot, you'll see that it includes a lot more. So I can increase it a little bit at a time and decide where I want to go with this. What this is doing is it's giving me an area that it's going to make a selection for. And that's what we want to select an area. It's going to be inside the marching ants, and then I can use that to paint away the area that I'm masking. So let's say this is good. I'm going to say okay, and you can see my marching ants. So I want to make that smaller is what I wanted to do. And it'd be great if I zoom in here closer, and you can see if I need to get back to my mask now. Next step, make sure I've got black, make sure I'm on my brush, make sure I'm at 100% opacity and 100% flow. Oops. And pull that back up. And so if I come over here and start painting, you'll see when I go into the brown, it doesn't do anything because it selected the blue. And so my marching ants are only around the blue areas. So I can go in and paint this away. But you know what? Those marching ants are bothering me. I can't see what I'm doing very well, what's happening. So I want to hide them. I don't want to get rid of them. I just don't want to look at them. So if I do a Command or Control H, it hides it. So I'm going to go over here, and now I can see what I'm doing. And I can paint this away. And we definitely want to get inside here and get it out from all these little nooks and crannies. This is a great way to get in those tight areas. Now, I don't know at what point I can stop erasing this water because I have water in the background. So let's just turn on our background and look. All right, so we have water all the way through here. So I want to get rid of it all down through here. And even with the background on, I can still go ahead and paint that out. But one thing I want you to notice, see this green? This is our background layer. That's the original tree. I need to get rid of that. So as soon as I get rid of doing this selection that I've just used, we're going to go back and we're going to get rid of that tree. So we're going to come back to that in a minute. I'm going to turn that off. I just wanted to show you. And I'm going to continue to paint away. I'm going to be a little careful around the rocks because sometimes there's a little overflow. I'm going to keep that white water. And I'm going to come. Now you'll notice that it's still leaving. I'm going to soften this edge. I don't want it to be a hard edged anything because I think you'll be able to see my hard edge if I leave it there. So I'm going to paint that hard edge away, all the way. And I should have a 0 hardness on my brush. See that? So I'm going to come back and you'll notice each pass, I can get rid of a little bit more of those lines that are laid out that are still there. So there is a little bit you can get with another pass. I'm not sure exactly why that is. It's the way that it's selected is why, but so anyway, I'm going to continue to do this as quickly as I can. It's kind of like watching a paint dry, right? But you'll notice it does a decent job at leaving the branches, not 100%, but if you're familiar with doing any selections in Photoshop, you know that sometimes those little branches can be a real problem doing a selection. So I feel like this is working pretty well. Okay. Just a little bit more. I'm going to go all over, even up there in the peachy area, just in case there happens to be something that's been selected. There really isn't. So that's okay. So, all right. So the next step, I need to continue to select some of these colors up here. So what I would do now, you can't see the selection, the marching ants, but they're still there. So I can unhide them. I don't have to, but there they are. So you can see them. So I just did a Command or Control H again. And so you can see that the marching ants are there. So it back and forth hides it, toggles it on and off. And I want to deselect it. So that's a Command or Control D. And so now my marching ants are gone. So now I'm ready to do a new selection. So I'm going to get back to the pixel layer. I'm going to go back to select, back to color range. I'm going to pick a different color this time. Let's go with this peachy color. And I can adjust the fuzziness if I want. That seemed to be pretty good before. I'm going to use it. And so you can see I have marching ants on an area. It doesn't 100% show you what is being selected. It just gives you an idea. I need to now go back to my mask, make sure that you still got the black on the brush. And I'm going to zoom in just so you can see a little bit better. And I'm going to hide my marching ants, Command or Control H. And I'm going to start painting away. And I can get into the green trees because I've selected areas outside the green trees. It's not seeing anything inside there. My marching ants are in the way. So we've gotten rid of a lot of it, not all of it. So now I just need to deselect. I could unhide it. I don't need to. I showed you that before. I'm just going to do a Command or Control D. I'm going to go back into my pixel layer, back up to select, back to color range, pick a different one that's still there. I'll pick that, say okay, hide my marching ants, and get back to my mask layer, paint away, go over all these areas again. You're going to do this until all this is gone. So we can still see a haze of some of this, but if you turn on your background layer and you can't really tell, then it's not a big deal because there was a little haze of something up here. I could see that. So then at that point you say, yeah, I can see it. I want to get rid of that. But some of this that was down here, I don't notice that. So I could leave it alone. So we will come back and pick that one up. And let's see, I think I got that. Okay. So let's just do that while I'm thinking about it. I deselected. I went back to my pixel layer, back to select, back to color range. I'm going to select on that one, say okay, back to my mask area, hide that, paint it away. See if that took care of some of these. You got rid of that one. If you need to see if something's showing up, you can turn your mask back or your background layer back on. Okay, so we've got up here pretty well. This still needs some work and so on, but here you can see that tree popping up back there. We got to get rid of that too. So I'm going to deselect, turn that off. Let me do one more here. I'm going to pixel layer, select, color range. Let's get rid of some more of this. Now I can do this again. And it did that. So let's go one more time, hide those. And I'm going to, go back to my mask and paint this away. And it's doing a pretty good job, but I'm going to have to select a few more things. And I don't have a whole lot of this in the way. So what if I just got rid of my selections and just tried to freehand this and see if that works. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to deselect, Command or Control D. I now have no marching ants to control me. So if I go over, I've messed up. So I don't want to do that. I just need to be aware of where I am and be very careful. I might be making my brush smaller and larger as needed. And I'm just going to go in and very carefully paint this out. And in this case, I think it's a faster option than clicking every different shade of gray that's in there. If it gets too close, you can try to go in and get it. And see, I got kind of close right here, and you can see I actually got into the tree a little bit. So I'm going to undo by doing Command Z, Command or Control Z. I'm going to come up to my brush and I'm going to put a harder edge on it so it's not so feathery, so I can get closer without affecting an area that I don't want to affect. And I'm going to come in. And some of these branches I don't need, and some of them may not be branches, they may just be dark waves. So I can get rid of whatever I want to clean up in here. And if it looks bad, just undo it and redo it. And so I would need to go around most of this area. Now this right down through here is in the water. So does it matter is the question. So let's look at this and see if it does matter. So I'm going to turn my background back on. And here you can see these dark areas. That's that dark stuff that was on here. So I could do it from this point of view. Wherever I see something dark, just go over it and erase it if I don't like it. And so you're only erasing on, you're not erasing the background layer, you're only erasing on that tree layer. But if I erase that tree, if I get into there, it will do that. So this might be easier. Then you can see, what do I really need to worry about? Because some of it may not show up anyway. And you can come over here. See, that looks pretty decent. I'm going to leave that alone. Up here looks pretty bad. So you would need to get it out of the sky for sure. Let me turn that off so I can see. So I would want to go through, and I don't think I'm going to go ahead and do it all. It just takes too long. It's not hard. It's just kind of tedious. So I would go and get this to perfection the way I want it. And then you will have a good selection of your tree. I will get some of these up here that are obnoxious. I'm just not going to get in those tight spots. And you can get rid of some of these branches if you want to. It's up to you. They're clutter. So sometimes it'll look cleaner. And you're obviously not doing a realistic thing. You've already enlarged the tree. So it's obviously not an exact replica of what you saw, or I saw in my case. So this is a little hairier right through here because I can do a selection of that gray, but I've done it getting ready for this class, and it's so close to the color of the green that it will erase a bunch of the trees. So here you just have to hand do it and be ultra careful as you go around some of this stuff. And so just continue to adjust the feather on your brush and the size of your brush and get in there tight. And I would go in between. Just keep making them smaller and get in there. And so we'll stop at this point because I've done a lot and it's boring for you and me. So, all right, so we'll say we've got all this ready. So our next step would be now to back up, turn on the background, and see what you've done. Now, I told you we still have tree. Look, see, we've got this tree. That's the one we just made larger, but we still have the original tree. We need to get rid of that. So I'm going to turn off my big tree, and I just need to select this guy and get rid of it, or I need to get rid of it somehow. So let's see what we do. First of all, we have to make the layer that this is on active. And this is the new remove tool. So I'm going to click on this remove tool. And now I'm just going to make my brush a little smaller. And I'm going to get in here and I'm going to paint on this tree. Trying to be moderately accurate. Yes, I'm going to get the sky, but you know what? It figures it out on its own. And it will be fine. So I'm going to just paint over the tree. Just want to make sure I've got it all out of there. And some of it's going to be hidden by the new tree. I just want to make sure I got all the old tree or out that will show. All right. So again, I won't do it automatically. I have to come up here and hit the check mark box, and we just have to wait for it to process. So we'll wait for our progress bar, and we've got it. It's gone. There's a little spot right there. So we'll just, I could have checked to see if it's even showing. And some of this isn't perfect. Some of it's kind of fuzzy, but let's turn on our new tree and see if what's left. So we can see we do have some issues. There's some out of focus, a little bit soft areas here. And this is kind of a mess up here. The end of the mountain is just not right. Here's a spot. So we do need to fix that. So I'm going to turn my new tree off, and I need to get up here and fix this. So let's just do a clone stamp. I'm going to do it right on this layer. I'm going to zoom in just a little tighter so I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to select a little bit here, and I'm going to sample by holding down the Alt key, click 100% opacity. I'm just going to paint over that mark. So that's gone. So now I need to fix, I didn't mind this mountain being like this. It looked like it cut off behind the tree. So see, the tree is kind of hiding it. So you don't know that it didn't just drop into the ocean somewhere back in here. So I'm good with where that ended, but this was a little mushy. And this would normally need to be cleaned up because the ocean doesn't flow like that. So, but again, that's behind the tree. So we really don't have to fix that. All I need to fix is from this point out through here. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to grab some of this information, and I'm going to sample here by holding down the Alt key, clicking, and I'm going to come, see, I haven't messed with this, but there's a repeating pattern because I remove tool made a repeating pattern. So I can get in there and fix that too. But I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and I'm just going to start making a new mountain. And I just want to pull it over here a little bit. And now I can make this be the shape of the new mountain. We can turn on our tree and see. I could bring it out farther or I can end it here. It does need some cleanup, but don't let that get to you. So I'll just let it end. Well, we'll go a little farther. So maybe like that. Now I'm going to get a harder edge on my brush and see what happens here. So it's not quite as fuzzy. So it almost looks, maybe it got a little too hard. Let's back it up just a little bit. I mean, it's not the real thing, so we just have to make it look like it could be real. And I'm going to actually grab some of the mountain in the background. I'm going to sample here, and I'm also going to paint in a little bit here. And I'm just playing, just clicking and playing until it looks like it could be real. Now, we have some repeating stuff going on, and that's what we need to get rid of, because nothing is more obvious, shows more obviously that you have replaced something than a repeating pattern that would never be there in real life. And we have several. So one is these lights. So let's get rid of that. Just pick an inconspicuous place and paint over that. Okay, that's decent. And we don't want to pick something that stands out as being unique, where some of those edges look unique. We don't want that. So we just want to pick something that's a little bit more simple and plain, and click that in there. And then let's get rid of that line. There's a line there. I'm going to resample. Click here. Now this needs to go away completely because it's a repeat of that right there. So I can do a couple things. I could try my spot healing brush or my removal tool. Let's just do the spot healing brush. It's faster. And let's remove it here and here. And then this is the repeated here. So we got to get rid of that. And if you want to, we can go back to the stamp, sample, maybe get rid of some of that so it doesn't look repeating. Now, I don't know that you notice this is repeating here and here, so that would be another thing to try playing with. And essentially, you just have to break it up a little bit. I just clicked on one spot and painted it in a couple places. Now it doesn't look quite the same. So you could pick a dark area and maybe, I don't like that, so I'll just go back. That looks pretty realistic, and we're not going to be this close. So you can decide if you like this. You could get rid of that totally, even though it was not repeating. And now we've got that in the background, and you can see if it still looks like a repeating pattern anymore. This is not, so none of this was all there. So it's just this one. I think it's okay. So I would say we're good to go on this. So we've fixed all that. Oh, and so we would be ready to move on at this point and just continue our editing. Just curious, I can't see y'all. Or is there anybody still there? Am I talking to myself?
I'm still here.
All right. So, okay, the next thing we're going to do is we really need to get these into one layer. So I could do a couple things. I could merge my foreground down into my background layer, or I can just make another visible stamp. So that's what I'm going to do by hitting Shift, Option, or Alt, Command, or Control E. Oops. And you'll see it didn't come into the right place because I had this layer as my active layer. I should have had the one on the top. So I'm going to undo, activate the top layer, Shift Alt Command E. Got my new merged layer. So we'll just say that's a blend. Now, we just need to decide, what do we do now? And so I still would like this to pop a little bit more. So I want to show you how you can do a dodge and burn layer. So let me get a drink here real quick, and then I will show you that. Okay. So dodging and burning, while it doesn't look like it's doing a whole lot at the time, it can do a lot. So we can do it easily by just creating a new layer. Now I have an action to create this layer, so I don't have to continuously go up and make one of these layers, but I'm going to show you how to make one. And you could turn it into an action just like we did with the other action that we made, by going to the actions panel, going here, getting out of button mode, and click new action, title it dodge and burn. You can see mine is up here, dodge and burn, and make one that way, and it will record it, and you can stop it and so on. But here's how you make, if you don't want to make an action, just here's how you make a layer that you will do dodge and burn on. You're going to go and make up to here and make a new layer. Go to new, go to layer, you click on it, and now you get this panel that looks like this, which gives you more options than if you click on add a new layer here. So we're going to just title this dodge and burn. And I misspelled it, but you know what it means. Oh, shoot. I do want to go back. So I'm going to go back and do that again. New, got ahead of myself. Dodge, burn. Okay, now we don't want to hit OK yet because we're not ready. So we can do two things, a few things in here we need to do. So one is we can add colors. So when it's, if you were making an action, it will make it a color. We're not doing that right now. So what we do need to do is change our mode here. So we need to go down to soft light and keep our opacity at 100%. Says fill with soft light neutral color, 50% gray. Yes, I'm going to check that. So what happens is it's going to make a layer that looks gray over here in the side. See that? It doesn't do anything. 50% gray hides itself. So it's not showing up in your picture at all, but you do see it over on the side. You don't have to check that. It's just, you can or you don't have to. But the rest of it is important. So now we want a brush. And there is a dodge and burn tool over here. So you can use that if you choose. And then there's the burn that looks like the hand. I don't use it. I just use a regular brush. And I make sure my opacity is at 10%. It could be 10 or 20. I start low. You can always increase it. And we need to have our colors down here to our defaults. So to do that, I can either hit or click on these little boxes here, or just hit the D for default on my keyboard. And I want to dodge, so that's white. Burn would be black. So I have burn, I have the black up on my foreground layer, which means it would start burning or darkening things. I want to lighten and brighten some things. So I want my white on the top. So I'm going to reverse my colors here. So now I have white on the foreground. I'm going to zoom in. And I want to accentuate what's already light from the sunset. Now the sunset probably is totally below the horizon now, so it's not shining harshly on my rocks, but it's still putting a glow on there. I haven't done anything to it, and you can see I've got some highlights and some shadows going on. So I just want to accentuate those. And so if I just start painting, you don't see much going on. But if I paint over the light areas and I just continue to build that up, they're getting brighter and brighter. And I know it looks really subtle. And I'm just going over the lightest areas. And it's just kind of punctuating the areas that I want to be brighter, so that I can draw more attention towards this rock and the tree. I could even do it on the tree if I want to. I can click and drag, or I can just click. I can do it to this area there, and I can continue to go, and you think, I don't see that it's doing anything. So let's look and see. Now you watch the picture. I'm going to turn it off and on. Here's on, here's off. So you can see we got that much lighter. And I can see I actually got into the water a little bit. I can erase that if I want to. But we can off and on. And so you can decide if you like it or not. Now, if I wanted to darken some areas, like the shadowy areas, so I want to make those more intense, I can flip my foreground color to black by clicking the X key or this little double arrow. And now I'll paint over these darker areas, and it just darkens the darker areas. And it tends to emphasize and work primarily on those dark, or if we were in the dodge area, on the light areas. And you can go through and add more impact by doing before, after. So if we back up and we do, this is on, and we turn it off, you can see that it's got less detail, more detail with the dodge and burn. Now, I was using white, but you know, you can use a color. So if we wanted to actually dodge in the colors, so we're putting some warmth on those rocks, like would be from the natural sunset, if we zoom in, we can do that. So I've got my brush. I want to come up and sample. So I'm going to click here. And I've got an eyedropper now. And if I come up and click, say, we'll say this peachy color that's in the sky, I click on it, that's been found. I say, okay, that is now my foreground color. I'm still on my dodge and burn layer. I can come over here and I can maybe reduce the size of my brush, and I can paint with that where I want to lighten those areas. Now, maybe it's too dark. If it is, you could go in and change it. So suppose you thought, oh, it's too much. I'm going to click back on here. I want that shade. I just wanted a little lighter. So here's the color we were using that we sampled up in the cloud. I'm just going to go straight above it, click straight above it. That gives us a lighter with the same saturation. I'm going to say, okay. And I'll start painting with this yellow, and that is going to warm up all of the dodging that I'm doing. And so it will look more like natural sunlight, and we're still just accentuating what was naturally lit. And you'll just keep painting on here until you're happy. You'll find whatever spots you want, and once it looks like you want it to look, then you can move on to the next thing. So that's how you create a dodge and burn layer. And let's go back to full frame, and we'll turn it off and on. And so it does look like the light is hitting it, and we could continue to play. We could put some up in the tree if we wanted to, and like it was raking across the foliage on that tree. And we're still on the dodge and burn layer. We've still got that warm glow going in our selection. So that's how you do that. And if you're happy with it at this point and you say, okay, I think I'm done, we'll go ahead and say this edit is done. I'm going to do a Shift Alt Select Command E, and I'm going to create another one of those visible stamps. And I am going, because I'm going to use that micro contrast action again, and I need it to be all in one group. So let's go back here for a second. If I didn't merge these all into one image, it would just put micro contrast on the top image. So I don't want that. I don't want it on the dodge burn only. I want it on the whole image. So I blended my layers all together, and I'm going to go up. This is a temporary blend, temporary thing. I can get rid of this or I can keep it. If my file's getting too big, I can get rid of it when I'm done with this action. But for now, I'm going to click on action. I'm going to go to my demo micro contrast. I'm going to click on it, and you'll see it did its thing. It's there. I'm going to click it off and on. You watch the picture. So it's on, it's off. It's on, it's off. Let's zoom in. It's off and it's on. Things just got a little sharper, contrastier, and it just worked just a little bit on some of the edges. And so now at this point, I'm ready to take it back into Lightroom. So let me pull this up so I can see. So my file, I have mine set up so you can see the size of my file. It's 687 meg. And so at this point, I'm ready to say I'm going to save it. I don't need to do anything more about flattening the layers. I can just do a Command or Control S. And you'll see now it says it's showing me that it's saving it. And so if yours isn't doing that, see that little arrow, you can set it up the way you want it to show, like the size of your file or whatever. And once that goes away, it will be back in Lightroom. And so we just have to wait. It's kind of a bigger file. If your files aren't as big as mine, then it wouldn't take quite as long. Depends on your computer too. Right, so we go back to Lightroom, and you'll see this one's highlighted. That's the one we just worked on. We just brought it back. So at this point, I would mark it as done with green. To me, that means I've worked on it, and I can decide how I want to crop it. So I'll take it into develop. And do I want to crop some of it off? I think that's a lot of sky. So maybe I want to turn it into an 8x10 format. And see, I can drag it around and see how much sky I want to see versus. So that's what it would look like. Do I want to see that whole tree? Do I want to get rid of it? I could get rid of it. It's a matter of what looks good to you. So we'll go back to there. And so there's our after. Let's see if I can show you the before here. So here's before, straight out of camera. There's after. You can decide which you like better. I say that one. So anyway, I've shown you a lot tonight. I appreciate you sticking with me because we went way past our 9 o'clock time frame to get this all in, but I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm going to stop sharing unless you have questions. Does anybody have a question? So if not, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to stop the recording here.